Ford EV battery plant construction paused in Michigan. Now, this may or may not be related to the strike, but there has been complaints from locals. There's even an organization grouped together to try to make this plant not occur, which it's a lot of jobs here. It's 25,000 potentially if this plant gets produced in Michigan for battery production. I think it'd be great to have battery production here because the Chinese, when there's battery scarcity, they will favor their own companies. Even if, you can be offering more and they're like, no, Chinese company gets the battery before American company gets the battery. So this is about national security. It's about national defense. We need batteries made here. So the Ford Blue Oval Battery Park in Michigan, that was announced back in February, is right now, it was slated to make lithium iron phosphate batteries in 2025, which I think is fantastic. A lot of my predictions for when we'll get plug-in vehicles have been based on this type of information, saying we'll get a lot of incredible new models for 2025. Well, that's if battery prices come down, because right now Ford loses money on electrified vehicles, at least the fully electric vehicles. Ford themselves say they lose $32,000 per vehicle. So you don't want to be losing more and more money because you're offering it on more and more models. Except, of course, there's the whole how much will we pay in fines to the government pushing this forward as well. Right now, it's on hold. There's been issues with, there's people have been worried that CATL, C-A-T-L, which is the Contemporary Amperex Technology Company, it's a Chinese company, working with Ford, while there's been worries about security issues in regards to that. But this is a $3.5 billion plant, was supposed to employ, hopefully still will, 2,500 people, and it'd be a 35 gigawatt hour per year of new battery capacity for FOMOCO in the US. However, slated to be built in Marshall, Michigan, and, local residents, local politicians having issues with this, the federal government scrutinizing it and, questioning, is everything going to be secure and safe? Because yes, this is in conjunction with a Chinese company, but it's 2,500 jobs. So I really hope this goes through. I hope the stalling has more to do with maybe the union and it being a bargaining chip, and that these jobs still come. I think local jobs are incredibly important for the economy. I never understand when people write things like, I hope, one of the all big three go bankrupt. And it's like, why so much hate? It's like being one of these individuals who's so far gone down the socialist tunnel that they think that we'll all be fine even if there aren't any jobs around. No, we won't all be fine if there aren't jobs around. If we want to have a safe, it's not just about quality of living. When people become poor, they also become desperate. If your family, if you've got the choice between doing a horrific act, a criminal act, a violent criminal act, but it's to, have money so that your family can have medication and survive, most people will do something pretty horrible so that a loved one can survive. You need a good economy to have a safe economy. And if you don't, then you can spend a lot of money on policing and hoping, but, you can't have a police. That won't solve the problem because you can never have enough police to keep everyone safe. You need to have people with good jobs. So another point where I can say I can understand the UAW saying, we need to have more full-time unionized workers so that there's not this huge, massive grouping of individuals working crazy hours. And even if they aren't working crazy hours, $17 to $19 an hour is no longer a living wage. You can't live on that. Not in these cities. Out in the country, it's a different it's different, but food is becoming more and more expensive. And unless you take the time to grow it all yourself, which I tried to do this year, but then all the neighbors sprayed pesticides on their lawns all around and that fumes over. So I ended up, anyways.
And the deer eat half of your garden.
And it's illegal for me to eat the deer.
Gone, so no more garden for you.
Yep, so no more garden. So let's go and check out the UAW, a little more UAW strike information. try to get this technology under control. So just on a side note, if you want a Bronco or a Maverick, look around. But if you don't find one, order one up. Make sure when you do order one up, you get a signed contract. You get a signed build sheet. And not just your signature, the dealer's signature, so that they're signing purchase or lease agreement, so that they're signing based on interest rate and price. These Broncos are really worth it. You can just see how big they are when you're comparing them with a a Ford Mustang parked beside and a Mustang Mach-E on the other end. And they're even big machines when parked, height and width-wise. They even look big beside an F-150.
Yeah, and I love how they put them in the color.
And they're all
white,
available.
Still green. So cute.
All available. And don't listen to YouTubers that will say Broncos are available at dealers because they're bad machines, or because people don't want them anymore, or because they're too expensive. They are, everything's expensive now. It's not that these aren't selling. It's just a lot of the people, at least in my area, who wanted a Bronco, got a Bronco. Mm-hmm. And we still have allotments. So these come in, they're available all at MSRP. The interest rate's still a little high on these models because they're still, you could say, relatively rare. An F-150, there's a lot of F-150s available. So Ford is offering rebates and really good interest rates. But yes, if the strike lasts a really long time and inventories get low, I could definitely see those rebates disappearing, or the interest rate going up. So,
wow, more higher than that. Ouch.
So I'd say if I had the choice between buying a new vehicle now or buying a new vehicle in
2 months.
3 months,
Now.
I'd say now is much better than in 3 months. That would be my tip of the day, because I think it will save you thousands of dollars in a combination of loss rebate compared to this month and next month, as well as interest rates going higher. Mm-hmm. All right, so we've got the UAW Precise News. Again, Brett Foote, Ford Authority, completely working it and doing a fantastic job, because all the information that he's covered is precise and accurate. So what do we've got here? Ford owns facilities far less affected by the new strike measures, because guess what? We're going to have major issues when it comes to getting parts. If you've got a recall coming up on your vehicle or a repair, this could be really tricky, because the UAW workers working at the parts centers, parts distribution centers, they're on strike. So good luck getting your parts. This is definitely going to affect buyers. This is I'd say it's a good for the UAW. It's a really good bargaining chip, because Ford doesn't want upset customers, and neither does Stellantis, and neither does GM. And if you've got a broken vehicle sitting at a vehicle, that's on the top of the list of things that could really upset people. So the UAW has actually pointed out, so through Twitter, I won't call it Twitter, X, what they're asking for. So they gave up a lot of concessions back in 2009, and they're asking for those essentially concessions back. So they want the reinstated COLA, so it's basically an adjusted cost of living percentage. They want that adjusted cost of living back. So when cost of living goes up, that means their salaries go up. So they want that. That was suspended back in 2009, and they willingly gave that up because they wanted the company to survive. They wanted to continue having a place to work. They helped out. And now that the manufacturers are making billions of dollars, well, of course, they gave stuff up to help the companies survive. Now they're thriving. They want that shared with them. The CEO's salary went up by 40% at GM. They want some of that. They want some of this back. And of course, the CEOs are thinking about the EV investments, all the money that needs to go there. They're thinking about the stock value because they're one of the major parts of their job is to make sure the stock goes up in value so that people who've invested in the companies and aren't actually doing any work, that they get their returns. So that's, you've got at GM, you've got the estimated 0% wage protection over the life of the agreement. So GM is just saying no. Stellantis is saying pretty much no. Okay, so that's
Easy like that.
easy like that. And that's why they're having to pay up more. So it's going to cost them more because they're going to get hit with plant closures far more so than Ford, because Ford is, they're coming back. Ford has come back with giving in more. Well, and we don't want to say giving in because it's not about winners or losers. I think it really needs, the focus of all this we need to forget ideology, and let's not try to make this about a socialist versus capitalist battle. Can we just focus on what number works so that these companies can survive and make some profit, a reasonable amount of profit, and that the workers get what they need to have lives, so that it's not just about, paying rent or a roof and food, that you can actually take your family on vacation. Remember, these workers, if you go back far enough, it wasn't that long ago that only one person in a couple had to work, and you could have 5 or 6 kids and 2 vehicles and a cottage off one worker's salary. And now both people work and it's hard to get by. So, I think we often forget, we see 40% as the main, 2 major points that the UAW is asking for, I think rubs certain people the wrong way. And they remember, hey, they're asking for a 40% wage increase. Well, that's 40% over 4 years. So that's 10%. Remember how much inflation has gone up. Not that far off from 10%. And the cost of living has exploded. And it's over 4 years. So it's actually 10% per year. So they want the cost of a living, they want that to be adjusted. So if the cost of living goes way up, they want to be able to, survive and maybe have a little bit of thrive in their life. Maybe take the family on vacation once per year and not have to work 60 hours to get by. So what else is being covered here? Let's see if I can get the next slide going. So Ford's job security proposal. So on the topic of job security, the proposal is they want the right to strike over plant closures, and Ford's down with that. So Ford said, yes, you can have this right to strike over plant closures in the event of an indefinite layoff. Income security for up to 2 years with healthcare applies to all employees with 90 days of service, including temporary workers. So Ford is saying basically, look, we value our temporary workers. They're important. This works for us. GM, rejected. So all completely rejected. Stellantis, completely rejected. This is the type of thing that makes me think, it's pretty easy to conclude that when the UAW has I think it's at least $825 million. So every single worker could be on strike for a little, actually, it's almost 11 weeks. So it's more than a little more than 2 months, but they don't have every single employee striking. They've been very clever, very effective. They've looked at what factories will cause kind of the most amount of damage, you could say, the most amount of, bad PR for the manufacturer, the most amount of problems when it comes to production for even other factories. And Ford and GM have both had to lay off workers at other factories because they're like, look, if X factory isn't bringing us the parts, the stamped parts, we can't assemble a vehicle, so we're laying off people. And that means those people get laid off. That's not coming out of the UAW strike fund. So they can be paying, let's say, 10% of their workforce a strike pay, but then have another 10 or 15% laid off, so even more damage being done for less money. So how they're doing it, they could be on strike I think they're showing the hand that they're showing for their poker game is they're making it pretty clear, like, hey, we've got two aces here. They can be on strike for an extremely long time if they're only going to have to pay 10, 15, 20. If they've said they will amp things up. Sean Fain has said, if you don't, if you're not negotiating in good faith, if you're not giving us, a bit more here, if you're not making proposals that don't reject everything, guess what? We're going to close you down more. So they've closed down more assembly plants at Stellantis and GM. So we'll get to that in just a moment. Now, profit sharing. On the topic of profit sharing, Ford is down. They're okay. They've okayed the idea of having enhanced profit sharing. So this formula would result in a 13.3% increase for the average employee in payouts. And profit sharing would extend to temporary employees who have at least 90 days of employment, which is fantastic because traditionally in today's economy, temporary employees or part-time employees or non-full contract employees, so non-fully unionized workers, often do get pretty badly treated. So like we mentioned earlier, $17 and $19 an hour, whereas a unionized employee with the same, let's say 8 years of working for the company could be very well making $28 an hour. So that's a huge difference. Huge difference. GM rejected, Stellantis rejected. So
So GM and Stellantis always share the same opinion for now.
yeah, Ford also down with, for the temporary workers, immediate conversion of all temporary employees that have worked at least 90 days upon the ratification of this contract. So basically this would mean that Ford right now is saying, okay, the UAW has asked us that any worker that's been with the company for more than 90 days instantly becomes a full-time, unionized, a full-out employee. That means they'll get the benefits, they'll get the proper treatment, the proper protections, the proper pay. We're okay with that. GM rejected, Stellantis rejected. So the big conclusion from this is, I think Ford prices are going to be affected the least. I think they might go up a little, but not nearly as much. GM is in a much, right now from the looks of it, GM and Stellantis are heading for a very long strike. And I think Ford's going to get out of this. I'm not going to say unscathed, but comparatively unscathed to the other two. Now, last thing I just want to cover in regards to tiers. Ford is fine with the proposal that the Rawsonville components and Sterling Axle employees will now be on the same wage scale as assembly workers. So they're saying, look, we'll pay everyone fairly. We won't have certain areas that get a lower pay. So they've eliminated the entire idea of a wage tier system. So a worker is a worker. That way there's kind of like a base minimum everywhere. Proposal, so for GM, they're saying that the GMCH and CCA employees will now be on the same wage scale as assembly workers, and they've also eliminated the tier. So good, there's a little bit of progress, but not much from GM. And Stellantis is like, no, if you work for Mopar, you're going to get substandard pay. Too bad. So they're not willing to pay everyone evenly. So they see that they feel there's differences maybe from one assembly plant to another. They feel certain assembly plants deserve to get paid less than another assembly plant. I can tell you, Stellantis is going to be in a lot of trouble if they don't move on that one, because as workers, it's pretty easy to see that it doesn't make sense. How's that fair? Like, how can you justify that that's fair? The only justification from that is like, hey, if we can pay people less because they're in an area that's more impoverished, we're going to pay them less, even if they're doing the same job as someone that's, 1,000 miles away. That's not going to fly. Big problem there.